Back about 10 years ago, I became aware of a few mega carriers that were implementing a company sleep apnea program. They had doctors on payroll. They were testing their drivers, particularly their new drivers, for sleep apnea. And it was surprising how many of these new drivers were testing positive for having sleep apnea. Well, of course, the company was there to help, and they sold them sleep apnea CPAP machines to each driver that they diagnosed as having this. The cost to the driver was $2,500 a machine. The company held the financing for it and tacked on a loan at the end. And of course, the mega carriers were making money at this. And I remember thinking 10 years ago back then, oh, well, there's a new scam they've come up with to empty money out of the drivers' wallets. This video is sponsored by Lanefinder. Fast forward to today, turns out these CPAP machines, the newer ones, have the ability to incriminate drivers and track drivers, and the strange thing is that just nobody is talking about it. The new CPAP machines, and God knows how long this goes back, have SIM cards. And the SIM cards can track what the driver does with the machine, send the information to the cloud, and then the carriers and the insurance companies can access that information right from the cloud. Fact, the US DOT federal driving test does not mandate a sleep apnea test. Fact, the testing for sleep apnea is anything but scientific. It's just sort of a guess and a gosh and a maybe type of a system. It's not an exacting science. Fact, some doctors will claim that they can detect sleep apnea by the size of a person's neck or how small their wind passage is. That's a judgment call if I ever heard one. Or how old they are, or whether they snore. It's all subject to the doctor's opinion. Some doctors will just walk in the room, take one look at a driver and say, oh, I can tell right away just from looking at you that you have sleep apnea. Now, one of the biggest tests, as I said earlier, was that doctors claim that if you snore, you have sleep apnea. I snore. My cat snores. Does that mean that both me and my cat have sleep apnea? Here's another fact. The sleep industry, the industry that produces stuff that supposedly helps people sleep, that is a $580 billion a year industry. They're almost as big and almost as powerful as Big Pharma. Here's another fact. Drivers are beginning to lose their jobs and their businesses over this random sleep apnea testing. It's happening out there. It's costing people their livelihoods. These mega carriers now can access the information from the CPAP machines, and in an accident situation, they will look at the driver's record from the cloud, from the machine, determine whether or not that driver has been using his CPAP machine often enough, and if he hasn't, they can blame the driver for the accident and avoid liability for the carrier, and they can blame the whole thing on the driver or on this lease operator. Now think about that for a minute. A lease operator that's supposed to be an independent contractor, but he's operating on the carrier's insurance, has an accident, the carrier doesn't want to pay for it. They look at the information and go, oh, he didn't wear a sleep apnea machine, his CPAP often enough. The lease operator's totally at fault, and we're just going to step away from this. Lanefinder is the ultimate job platform to help drivers find the jobs that they want. There are filters on the platform so that drivers can narrow down their carrier search to find out more information to help them pick the carrier that's best suited for them. The filters can help them determine the fleet size, where the fleet runs, the type of equipment the fleet uses, and all without having to talk to a driver recruiter. I highly recommend Lanefinder to help drivers find the best driving jobs out there. Check them out at lanefinder.com. The Mayo Clinic, one of the leading medical facilities in the USA, has determined that all sorts of people have trouble with these CPAP machines. It's quite easy to accidentally knock the mask off while they're sleeping, while they're rolling around. People with colds can't get enough oxygen when they're using a CPAP machine. Or some people just have trouble with intentionally forced air. It's not a comfortable situation, and all sorts of people have trouble dealing with a CPAP machine, and in any one of these instances, if the machine doesn't match up to what the criteria is for what the driver should be using it for, that can trigger a liability claim on the part of the carrier in an accident situation. Well, I just got a text from the Lettuce King. He's been pulled around the scale, and I guess he's in trouble again. I mentioned earlier that these CPAP machines and sleep apnea programs are costing people their livelihoods and their jobs. This video was inspired by a subscriber that got a hold of me and told me his story, how he'd gone in for his US DOT checkup and the doctor had just randomly asked, "Oh, do you snore?" And he told the truth, of course. He's 73 years old. He said, "Yeah, I snore." The doctor said, "Oh, we better send you to a clinic." They sent him to a sleep apnea clinic. He couldn't sleep with the CPAP machine mask on. He lost his license. He was in a small building business, his own business, so he couldn't even drive his small trucks to the job sites to deliver the building material that he needed to build these log homes. This stupid testing system cost this driver his job and his livelihood. All he did initially to trigger this whole thing was admit to a doctor that he snored. Here we are now, a few years later. He's been tested by another doctor and given the green light and gotten his license back. But in the meantime, he's already had to fold his business. There are all sorts of problems with this sleep apnea testing because it is not an exacting science. On top of that, when I think about it, I started driving in the 70s, and one of the biggest draws for truck driving was the freedom. Well, now today, there's virtually no freedom because of the ELDs and all the sorts of other mandates. So you're monitored, driver-facing dash cams, you're monitored all through the daytime while you're working. And now with these latest CPAP machines, you're monitored even when you're sleeping at night and tracked. So you're monitored 24/7. I fail to see how there's any freedom in truck driving today. The carriers, of course, love this 24/7 monitoring because in an accident situation, if they can find a loophole, any loophole, they're going to be the first ones to jump on it and point out that the driver must be at fault because it gets the carrier and the insurance company off the hook. The whole problem, all the liability, goes right to the driver. So here is one more thing that professional drivers have to worry about. Now, if it were me, and this is my own opinion, I know, because I'm a restless sleeper, that I could not sleep with a sleep apnea machine. I'd end up ripping off the mask because I toss and turn all night. I wouldn't sleep well with a CPAP machine. It would make me uncomfortable. I would be unhappy because I was being forced to do it by a carrier, and I would be really unhappy because I was being forced to pay for it. Now, that's just me. And carriers that'll push these things are saying that they're doing it for your own good. I don't believe that. I believe they're doing it for their own good. Personally, I would walk away from a carrier that insisted that I needed sleep apnea testing. Now, having said that, there are some drivers out there that may feel that they have a problem with sleep apnea. And I say to them, absolutely, go to a doctor that you trust and be tested by him. And by God, if he says you've got it and you're uncomfortable with not having the CPAP machine, absolutely, follow the doctor's advice. But I don't believe the majority of drivers suffer from sleep apnea. To summarize, I don't see that these sleep apnea machines and programs from carriers are in the best interest for the driver medically. I seriously believe that some of these mega carriers are using the sleep apnea program as a way to fatten their wallets and take money away from the drivers. But that's just my opinion. At the end of the day, the decision is yours. As a professional driver, it is essential that you're well rested, whether you need a CPAP machine to do this or not. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, make your own decisions about your mental and physical health, and I'll see you on the back haul.